Flood resilience of cities along river Niger and Benue, Nigeria. This program is coming up today, and just like the PRS announced to us, we have international collaborations. And also we have here moderators who is going to introduce all our speakers, even to us. Permit me to now hand over to my colleagues.
Hello. Can people hear me all right?
Online.
ìṣòro tí yóò ní kò tiẹ̀ le rárá. Ọ̀gá wo eléyìí tó bá ti wọ́ọ̀kì ni kò sẹ́ndì mo ṣáà ní gbogbo ẹ̀ bọ́ as in picture yẹn mo mix it together eléyìí tó bá ti wọ́ọ̀kì ni kò ṣe.
Please, Madam Olatoye, Yemis, can you mute yourself?
Thank you.
Distinguished participants, let's move on. Permit me to invite the National President, Tampana Nathaniel Atebije, FNITP, who is going to give us his opening remarks. Mr. President, sir.
The distinguished colleagues, we thank God for this opportunity again to discuss on issues that relate to livelihood and creating livable cities in Nigeria. We thank God for the partnership we have enjoyed with Arctic Infrastructure, Heinrich Bowles, Tipton, over the years. And this has generated quite a lot of information sharing to the extent that people get knowledgeable to know how to manage challenges within their environment. That people perish for lack of knowledge. And I think where there is knowledge there is wisdom. This year, we are talking about building flood-resistant cities along rivers Niger and Benue. And of course, this can be replicated in other places where we have challenges of flooding. It is not only along the cities, and that is why this information is important to all of us. In our studies across Nigeria, in various cities, we just got to know that people just want to live anywhere that land is available. They don't even care about how vulnerable it can be. And this has brought untold hardships because of disasters. We have had loss of lives. We have had loss of properties running into millions, billions, and getting close to trillions. And these are things that are avoidable. And it on the neck of the town planner to ensure that we build livable, flood-resilient cities. The much we are going to gather in terms of information and knowledge sharing in this meeting is going to greatly help us to be able to educate others and to talk to governments, to talk to institutions, where these issues are domiciled, to the extent that God helping us, we should be able to get over this, or at least minimize the level of disasters. We have always said that one of the challenges we have in our nation is that because it appears as if the public authorities don't seem to worry about preventive measures, and that is why we want to stay, reactionary, to be able to, react to situations. The essence of this gathering this morning is to help us to go beyond reacting, but being proactive in our, designs, plans for cities and for where Nigerians live. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to call on each and every one of us to be very attentive and get something to go with that will help your community, will help your city, will help your state, and at the end of the day, Nigeria will be happy for it. Thank you, and God bless you all.
A round of applause for Mr. President, please. Thank you very much. Paula is ready for us now, and I will just invite him to introduce all other speakers online. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Could someone just give me a sign that you can hear me all right in the room? All good? Well, if you can't hear, all right. I'm gonna continue. If you don't hear me, just give me a sign. So, hello, everyone. Welcome to the session on building climate and food resilience of cities along the rivers Niger and Benue, Nigeria. The session is organized by the Nigerian Institute of Town Planning and Arctic Infrastructure. My name is Paula Sevilla, and I am Program Officer at the Center on International Cooperation at New York University. I am currently at the airport, so apologies for any background noise, but I am delighted to join you all. This is my second time moderating an event with Arctic Infrastructure, and I believe that it is work that is extremely timely and very important, so I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much to Mr. Nathaniel Atebije Mr. President, for the introductory remarks. I am now charged with introducing you all to today's panelists and presenters, after which, sadly, I will have to run to catch my flight, but I will leave you in the good hands of my co-moderators. So we are going to initially hear from Mr. Yi Xiaofeng, who's online. He's the professor at Senior Planner of the China Academy of Urban Planning and Design. He will present on the issues of global cities and climate change, followed by town planner Mr. Lukman Ashodi, project director of Arctic Infrastructure, who will give us a background to the conference and to the theme of today. We will get into more detailed presentations, which will be provided by 4 presenters, starting with town planner Professor Arthur Isaga, immediate past chairman of the Nigerian Institute of Town Planners of the Delta State chapter. He'll be followed by Honorable Adewale Victor Omofaye, Honorable Commissioner of the Kogi State Ministry of Environment. We will also hear from Honorable Architect Michael Okonkwo. He's the chairman of the Anambra Urban Regeneration Council. And finally, we will hear from Lola Grundmann from Nature for Water Facilities. She will be joining us online as well, but she's currently not with us. She will join us shortly. We will also have a session of questions and answers and allowing you all to provide your comments. And then Mr. Kunle Awo Jamila, who is the director of the Department of Erosion of Flood and Coastal Zone Management of the Federal Ministry of Environment, who will join us later. Should I continue? Someone muted me, but should I continue?
Please,
Kindly continue.
Okay, all right, sorry about that. As I was saying, we will finalize with a summary of the discussion by Mr. Kunle Awo Jamila, who is the director of the Department of Erosion, Flood, and Coastal Zone Management of the Federal Ministry of the Environment. He is not with us at the moment, but he will join us later. And finally, we will hear closing remarks by town planner Chime Ogbonna, who's the first national vice president of the Nigerian Institute of Town Planners. So thank you all for joining us and for providing your remarks. As I mentioned, I have 2 co-moderators who will be moderating the discussion when I have to leave. One of them is joining online, and the other one will be with you in Lagos. First one is Mr. John Garrett. He's the Senior Policy Analyst of Development Finance at WaterAid. He's joining us from the United Kingdom. And our second moderator in person is Olutunde Babawale. Thank you so much for already helping us moderate the discussion. He's the Deputy Director of the Lagos State Ministry of Physical Planning and Urban Development. Finally, let me also thank a few of the participants in the room who have made this conference happen. Let me start with Town Planner Donato Bialo, who's the Chairman of the College of Fellows. Also, Town Planner Toyina Inde. He's the immediate past national president of the Nigerian Institute of Town Planners. We also want to thank Johan Luxscheiter. He's the director of the Heinrich Böll Stiftung in Nigeria. Also thank Monica Omuna, program manager of inclusive cities at the Heinrich Böll Stiftung in Nigeria. And finally, Hannah Balogun, who's the deputy head of projects at Arctic Infrastructure. We thank you all for co-sponsoring the event, helping us organizing it and making it happen. So thank you all.
Let's put it. Right.
Thank you very much, Paula. I think that was a really excellent introduction to all of the speakers that we've got today, and I think it's going to be a really exciting session. So I think if I'm correct in thinking, we can maybe move to our first speaker, Yi Xiaofeng from China. Am I correct in that? I hope everyone's hearing clearly, but I think that'll be the first speaker today.
Yes. So can I begin now? Okay. Okay. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege of being part of this session. My name is Yi Xiaofeng, a city planner from China Academy of Urban Planning and Design based in Beijing. Yes, thank you. Right, can you see me? Yes, I think. As well, please next slide, please. Sorry. Okay, thank you. As we all know, this is a global age, and everybody knows there's a climate change. Of course, the media and the social media always tell people the climate change is threatening us. But the truth is that climate change is much closer to us than before. Many people can feel it, touch it, and suffer it. Why? Please next. Back to the early years of human civilization, the coastal cities are more global due to the closer locations to the international trade route. Please next, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Hannah, are you able to move to the next slide, please?
Okay, no problem. The next map is a map about the Silk Road of Silk Road back to 2,000 years ago. But at the turn of the century, many cities along the coastline have been becoming the global cities, which are capable of controlling the production and the consumption of the world. We can name these cities like New York, London, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Shanghai. The list could be long, but very long. The mighty nature is fair, no matter how much wealth the global cities have. The climate change is threatening the world, and the global cities are no exception. Okay, let me show my screen. Okay. All right. Is it good to see?
Yes, yeah, we can see that now. Yeah.
Okay. This is a maritime Silk Road I'm going to show. Yes, it's back to 2,000 years ago. I can see that Guangzhou and many cities on the coastlines, and at that time they're connected by the Silk Road. And from this map, we can see many global cities are along the coastlines, and nowadays they're becoming more and more global, and these cities can control the production and consumption of the world. These cities including New York, London, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Shanghai. The list could be long. Yes, maybe yes, more than 20 or 30, but this is not a very long list. The mighty nature is fair, no matter how much wealth the global cities have. The climate change is threatening the world. The global cities are no exception. Since the global cities can mobilize the resources around the world, they can be the pioneers to fight against the climate change. What they have done, or what they have been doing, can be learned for the rest of the world. But what can city and town planners learn, and what can planners do about the climate change? The planners are no politicians, no engineers, no architects. What can we do as planners? What the role the planners can play in the age of climate change? I like to say something about what Chinese planners, especially planners from our academy, are doing about climate change. Since we cannot have a uniform solution to the climate change, it is important to share thoughts and practices. As we as far as concerns the climate change, we can do two things. The first, reduce the risk that climate change brings, like keep away from the flooding area or the rise of sea level. The second, reduce the possibility of the climate change emission of the greenhouse gases in the cities. At the city level in China, a new planning tool called the Urban Growth Boundary has been introduced to the master plan since 2019 by the central government. Beyond the boundary, only few construction projects can be approved, like water infrastructure and ecological protection. The message from the central government is very clear and strong. First, the safety of the cities are the number one priority. Cities must reduce the risk of flooding. The second, excessive urban development is banned to guide the cities to adopt a new way development other than mainly depending on the sprawl of the suburban new towns, which has been popular for the nearly 20 years in China. With the help and of the scientists in the field of the geography, ecology, atmosphere, etc., the planners have completed the work of demarcation of urban growth boundary for all cities in China this year, and the local planning departments have used it to manage the new land use applications. The planners for blue and green system have been paid unprecedented attention in China. Blue system is another name for the river and the water system in China. It's not only about the cleanness of the water, but also the connectivity of the system to make sure the water can flow, designing the system to reduce the occurrence of flooding. Green system is about a green space system, not only for leisure purpose, but also for ecological purpose to reduce the temperature of the cities and save water in the soil to reduce the overland flow when raining. The central government issued a sponge city policies to encourage the city to start relevant work by compensating the cities which are chosen as beacon cities or sponge cities. Many research shows that transport, especially the fossil fuel vehicles, is the main source of greenhouse gases. The transit plan is what planners can do about it. The length of the metro lines combining Shanghai or Beijing are around 800 kilometers. The passengers the metro system carries per day in Guangzhou, Shanghai, Beijing are more than 6 million. Another thing that the planners can do is to encourage the use of new energy, especially electric cars, by planning charging facilities at all levels. In major cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, the buses, the taxis, and the public purpose vehicles are all driven by the electricity. Community is a new battlefield for Chinese planners. Community planning initiatives have been becoming popular. In the background of urban regeneration, planners propose new public space or third space for the community to encourage people to interact, communicate with each other, and then empower themselves. When the disasters came, people could work together to fight against them. Planners also help reduce carbon emission by many possible ways. For example, to create a more pedestrian-friendly environment to encourage people to walk more and drive less, and encourage the use of solar panel to light up the outdoor environment. From my experience, what planners do is very different from what they did many years ago. Since the world is changing, the society is evolving. About climate change, we planners can do something. That depends how innovative we think and do. Although we do not have money, we do not have cutting technologies, then the role we can play could be making people work together to make a difference for a more resilient world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yi, for a really excellent and thought-provoking presentation. I think you've really shared so many important initiatives which are taking place in Chinese cities at the moment, and which are relevant for many of the challenges which face cities in Nigeria in the context of, as you say, the climate change and the increased risk of flooding. but also to be thinking not just in terms of the adaptation that's required, but also the mitigation as well. So planners can have such an important contribution to all of these things. And I think many of what you've shared there is very relevant for the context in Nigeria as well. So we look forward to hearing comments. I think the next speaker is Mr. Lukman Oshodi. So perhaps Mr. Lee, if you wouldn't mind not just stopping sharing your screen, and
yes,
then
of course.
we can move to Lukman Oshodi, the project director of Arctic Infrastructure. But thank you very much for that fascinating presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Now we continue on these topics, building the climate and flood resilience of cities along River Niger and Benue, Nigeria. Now, permit me to invite the project director, Arctic Infrastructures, Samkana Lukman Oshodi, fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Town Planners. He's going to give us a background to NITP Arctic infrastructure programs on climate change and flooding in Nigeria. You are welcome, sir.
Good morning. Distinguished members of NITP. Let me start from the Mr. President, the first National Vice President, all the ESCO, the honorable commissioners seated, and of course the general, the chairman of Anambra Regional Development Council, the College of Fellows, and of course the distinguished members of NITP. Permit me, if I breach the protocol in any way, kindly forgive me in that direction. So my task here is to give a brief background of this collaboration, where we are coming from, where we are, and of course where we are going. I am pleased to deliver this brief remark under the collaboration among the Nigerian Institute of Town Planners, Arctic Infrastructure, and Enrichpol Stiftung. Since 2014 in Lagos, the NITP, Arctic Infrastructure, and Enrichpol Stiftung have had a good relationship in pursuing a common development goals at the NITP conferences. The conferences in 2021 in Port Harcourt and 2022 in Abuja confirmed that the relationship has gained tremendous traction and made a relevant impacts in shaping the directions of urban development and climate change in Nigeria. The 2023 National Conference is continuing in that tradition of collaboration to work together in changing the narrative of urban development and climate change impacts in Nigerian cities. As we may know, Nigeria is regarded as the largest country in sub-Saharan Africa, with estimated of a population of 223 million, and of course a 2.4% annual growth rate. And that means it ranked sixth among the population ladder across the world. Disaster risk management is considered a national priority because of the rising environmental challenges, including extensive flood damage in recent years, low adaptive capacity, and the projection of a substantial climate change caused by 2050. As of August 2023, the National Emergency Management Agency NEMA provided the following data of flooding, which affected 10 states, and of course about 33,000 persons affected. We have a 75% injury and 5 deaths. So this shows significant reduction compared to the figure of 2022. So that means there is a considerable efforts to really mitigate disaster related to flood risk in Nigeria. So actually said that considering the devastating floods in Nigeria, particularly along the Niger and Benue rivers, there is an urgent need to build flood resilient cities, that urgent need is really here. And it is ideal that we must act. So in July 2023, the Arctic Infrastructure and Enrich Board and the Office of Strategic Preparedness and Resilience in the Vice President Office of Nigeria organized a two-day capacity building workshop in Lagos on building flood resilience cities, especially along Niger and Benue rivers, with a follow-up second workshop in September 2023. We have 7 states in attendance of the workshop, which include Anambra, Bayelsa, Benue, Delta, Kaduna, Kogi, Lagos, and later the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, in attendance. We were able to get different experiences, challenges, needs, and opportunities on flooding and climate change. Some of the findings and challenges identified during the workshop include irregular rainfall pattern due to climate change, Bayelsa State being highly vulnerable because of its geographical location that receive a runoff water from other upstream states. Compromise of the provision of development plans in different states, and of course in different cities. And of course, where available, then we have an inefficient dam management as a key factor, and a neglect to widen the river or to dredge the rivers as and when due. Then we equally have a conflict-induced large-scale migration into our cities, and which is affecting the development along the corridors of those rivers. The issue of a drainage master plan is another thing. In most cases, these drainage master plans are not available, and where available, the implementation is below par. So then inadequate engagement and of course collaboration among the states along that riparian area. So we observe all this, and of course we are able to see the consequences of all these gaps. And the consequences include destruction of farmlands, the displacement of settlers, destruction of housing and businesses, contamination of groundwater, lack of food and sustainable livelihoods, the collapse of strategic infrastructure, especially transportation system, and the revelation that the Bayelsa State may disappear in the next 50 years. Some of the measures suggested in the workshops include the formulation of a national and state level flood resilience policies, the preparation of a transformative city master plans, and a water ecosystem. And I think this is very key to us as urban planners in this part of the world, that our development need to be more transformative in its approach. If you look at many of our states, if you are approaching, you could see the isolated low-rise development in different directions, which are not really responding to the resilience or ability of cities to respond to disaster risk management. The same thing is applicable if you go to, whether you go to Enugu, whether you go to Asaba, whether you go to Borno, whether you go to Bauchi, whether you go to Lagos, whether you go to Ogun, you could see the level of development. So that means as an urban planner, as urban planners, we need to be transformative in our plans. And of course, we need to ensure that there is a full implementation and ability of these plans to withstand the impacts of climate change, as that impact is globally and is not isolating Nigeria as the case is. We are optimistic that the outcomes of this session and the entire conference will feed into the implementation action plans of the federal government through the Ministry of the Environment, Ministry of Water Resources, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, and of course, the National Council on Climate Change and different states. So the flooding situation and global climate change are significantly impacting Nigeria, especially on the settlements along the corridors of the rivers. Therefore, efforts must be concerted to mitigate and adapt to the changing situations. As city planners, we have an overwhelming responsibility to lead in the efforts and transformation and managing development around the rivers and of course, other water bodies. Many communities in the West African sub-region, they are looking up to Nigeria to give a direction in the area of urban development, in the area of climate change measures, and of course, as city planners in Nigeria, I know we have done this before, and we can still take the lead, and we can still take many cities in West African sub-region to the promised land when it comes to climate change issue. So I would like to take this opportunity to express appreciation to the National President, Tamplana Atebije, the first National Vice President, all the Executive Committee member, and of course, the Vice President of NITP, Tamplana Olutoyin, for enabling this type of conversation. Also, I would like to mention our partners who provided some level of support in this journey, including members of Enrich Bowl Stiftung, the country director, Joshen, and of course, the Lagos program manager, Monica Umuna. And then I would like to express appreciation to all our partners who are online, who are listening to us, who are contributing one way or the other, who make that contribution to the success of this session. I say thank you, everyone. And my suggestion is that as we are going forward with the National Conference of NITP, I may want to suggest that we consider the changing of the name to International Conference in due course. So with that, I will say thank you to everyone. Thank you to NITP. Thank you.
A round of applause for Project Director, Arctic Infrastructures. Thank you very much, Tamplana Lukman Oshodi, Fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Town Planners. Now, we are going to hear the overview of flooding in Delta states. And to take us on this is Tamplana Professor Arthur Esaga, who happens to be the immediate past chairman, Nigerian Institute of Town Planners, Delta States. Please permit me to invite him to the podium for his presentations. Thank you very much.
The National President of the Nigerian Institute of Town Planners, my senior colleagues, past presidents, distinguished participants. Thank you so much for this opportunity and Arctic Infrastructure for this opportunity to share some insights on flooding in Delta State. Permit me to say that I will christen this presentation as Strategy for Mainstreaming Climate Adaptation and Build Resilience in Flood-Prone Communities in Delta State. Hope it's not too loud. Okay, well, the presentation will be made in 11 slides. Of course, we are teachers. We will try to run through it so that we don't take much of your time. But the issues will be clearly. I should hold it, Abi. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I think it's better. Next slide, please. Okay, this 10, the outline, I'll have 11 slides. We'll look at the statistics. We'll look at the graphics. And then we'll look at the issues from 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Next slide. Okay, so the pictures are the graphic pictures. We're looking at the 2012 flood data statistics in Delta State. For the communities, an estimated 328 plus persons lost their lives. According to the federal government impact assessment rating, Delta State was the worst affected in Nigeria. 12 local governments were affected across the 3 senatorial zones. And a total of 231 communities were affected in 12 local government areas. A total of about 2,000 persons. Over 20,000 were affected and were displaced. The graphics are there. Next slide. Okay, when you compare that to 2022, a total of 7 local government areas were affected. In 2012, there were 17. Here, there are 7. And 12,070 households were affected. 78,640 persons and individuals were affected. Isoko South accounted for 28% of all the persons that were displaced. Of course, because of its geographical location, because of its hydrological setting. And about 18,836 persons were displaced. Ughelli South local government area had 16,000, came second with 16,300 persons, while the list is Ughelli North local government area with just 5%. Gullies, of course, you can see the graphic pictures. Next slide. Okay, assets and facilities affected by 2012. Of course, you know, when floods come, it destroys everything because the power of water is stronger than even the power of fire. And I think that was one of the reasons why in the scriptures, in the Holy Writ, we're told that, and the Lord saw the damages, the destruction, and he regretted, destroying the earth. 118 community markets were partially damaged and submerged. Of course, 743 retail stores were partially damaged or completely damaged. 4,357 fish farms were completely submerged, and thousands of fisheries were destroyed. Livelihoods were destroyed. 526 poultry farms were affected, and thousands of birds were killed. 58 piggeries were lost, and their structures were partially damaged. So you can look at the colossal damage. And according to the State Emergency Management Agency, an estimated 3.1 billion naira worth of facilities and properties were destroyed in 12 local government areas. Next slide. In 2022, 4,892 houses, buildings were destroyed, were affected. 19% were partially damaged, while 7% of those numbers were completely damaged. Of course, there were deep gorges were created and rose. You can see that picture. 924 toilets were partially or fully damaged. You can imagine the environmental problems. You can imagine the environmental contamination and the disease pandemic that will result from that. And then 53 water taps. But significantly, 94% of all educational facilities in those 7 local government areas were either partially submerged or in some cases, almost nearly totally submerged. And there were no access. There was no access to these schools, health facilities for a period of 3 to 4 months. And so you can imagine the damage. You can imagine the impact that will have on those communities and the state at large. Next slide. Okay, the statistics for, next slide, please. Okay, what are the socioeconomic impacts of floods? Of course, you know, poverty and dependency ratios. Most of them are displaced, their means of livelihood destroyed, their fishery farms destroyed, their farmlands submerged and destroyed, their crops completely destroyed. So most of them are left without any means of livelihood. And you can imagine the poverty. So there is exacerbation of poverty. And of course, dependency ratios. If you have a member of the family that is having any means of livelihood, you can imagine 10, 20, 30 persons. In Aviara, of course, where 1 or 2 persons were not affected, their houses were filled with persons, and it was practically impossible to feed them. Of course, destruction of family properties and lifetime assets. According to the United Nations, the wealth of nations, 85% of the wealth of nations are stored in their land use and facilities and assets. So you can imagine when complete communities are submerged, all their lifetime assets, all the wealth of that community completely destroyed and wiped out. Of course, there were loss of lives and dislocation of social capital assets. Of course, in developing countries, social capital assets, relationships, and ties and network of friends. They are the source of strength in the times of adversity, and flooding will not even spare such social capital assets in these communities in Delta State. Of course, we saw the impact. And look at the disease pandemic in two communities, Ole and Aviara, in Isoko South Local Government area. The disease pandemic, diarrhea was more than 31%. Persons were affected. Skin infection, more than 24.6% of the persons were affected. We said about 18,000 people were displaced. So you can see the number. When 24% are affected with skin infection, 35.2% affected with malaria, and measles less than or greater than 8.0%. Of course, tetanus and typhoid fever, 21.1%. And so you see, when flood comes, it comes with so much multivarious dimensions of problems, of impacts and consequences. And that is why planning must be carried out. Planning intervention is necessary as a proactive measure to ensure that even if it must happen, it must be mitigated. Mitigated in the sense that the damages, the destruction that will attend such floods can be minimized, can be contained to a reasonable extent. Next slide. Environmental impacts, coastal degradation, coastal aggression. Of course, we know that mangroves are the nature's way of protecting coastal communities. But most of those mangroves are destroyed. Of course, you will see deforestation. As we go down, you will see the statistics on deforestation. Of course, pollution of surface streams and shallow aquifers, despolation of floodplains and erosion watersheds, increased siltation of streams and riverbeds, and vanishing natural drainage basins. This is very common, especially in the middle belt, where rivers, where rivulets were all silted up. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so look at now what these are the existing conditions: dilapidated infrastructure and man-made drainage channel. The reason for flooding in Delta State is because there are so many rivers. You know, you have the Ethiopia River, you have the Focados River, you have the Escravos River, and you have the Benue River. And all these streams, they bifurcate the whole area. And so water traveled thousands, hundreds of meters, and even thousands of meters. And that was why the whole of Delta State was submerged. You can see the various rivers, and you can see the massive deforestation of coastal mangroves and increased siltation of rivers and streams, and lack of fiscal planning of existing urban and rural communities. Next slide. As we conclude, permit me to share some of the measures that are necessary to mainstream climate adaptation and to build resilience in those coastal communities. One, construction of drainage channels. No, this past efforts, if you look at this past efforts, just, you know, the periodic desertation of existing drainage channels and structures, and dredging of some rivers, the demolition of illegal structures. Those ones does not address the issue of climate adaptation and does not even include the issues of resilience. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, what do we do? These are the challenges: rapid increase on urban population and high impervious surfaces, which is even exacerbating existing conditions in those communities. And what do we need to do? But there are opportunities, availability, and improved access to international carbon and environment finance. Communities can access that. Government can access that by providing, bankable projects, bankable programs that these countries can finance. Now, what do we need to do? Fiscal planning in all efforts, massive reforestation of all river and stream corridors with indigenous plant species, very important, very significant. And then strict enforcement of 30, 40 meter setback of buildings from stream corridors. Of course, comprehensive mapping of natural basins, floodplains, and also to delineate, and classify human settlements based on vulnerability to floods and flood risk assessments. Next slide. How do we mainstream these measures? I'm sorry, my time is up, so the next slide. Okay, what is the strategy for mainstreaming climate adaptation and resilience? First, professionals must be engaged to carry out intensive studies on flooding phenomena. 2, comprehensive mapping of floodplains, river watersheds, drainage basins, and hydrologic settings. Number 3, subject matter experts must be carry out what we call disaster risk assessment studies and vulnerability assessment studies. Very significant. Delineate, classify human settlements based on disaster risks and vulnerabilities. And thereafter, you prepare regional plans, sub-regional plans, local area plans, and sector plans to address the concerns that were revealed from the various studies. And of course, provide annual grants on a continuous, on a sustainable basis. Annual grants, budgets, attract investments into floodplain development. Very important, very significant. And above all, we need to engage planners. We need to engage planners in all agencies like SEMA, the local environmental management agencies, to utilize planning knowledge. And finally, there's need to develop, publish, and disseminate tree planting and greening schemes for communities. Reforestation is critical to mitigating flooding in coastal communities, because when the white man came, they saw big trees and they planted very big trees. And then when we took over, we removed all the big trees. And now water is not here with us. Trees are the lifeblood of any society. They provide water, they provide energy, they provide air, they provide nutrients, they provide even level of sustainability. So without vegetation, it is almost impossible for us to mitigate and build climate adaptation, and to adapt our cities to climate adaptation and build resilience. I want to thank you so much, most sincerely, for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Distinguished participants, please a round of applause for Prof for these beautiful presentations. We are running out of our time. Please permit me to invite for the next presentations the Honorable Commissioner, Kogi State Ministry of Environment, who is going to talk to us on the confluence of major rivers and the burden of flooding, the experience of Kogi. You are welcome, Honorable Commissioner. Sorry, we'll give you just 10 minutes, sir. I'm very sorry, sir.
Thank you. Of course, I'm not a professor. And so within my own limit, I should be able to give what I have here in the next 10 minutes. Yes. Well, let me just be on the already spelled out protocol because of time. Because I know from the 10 minutes, if I start to acknowledge each and every one of us today, I will have like 5 minutes remaining. And so, well, Kogi State, to the glory of God, is a state that is strategically located, in the sense that that is where you have the coming together of the, will I say, the 2 largest rivers in Africa, Niger and Benue. And so, well, environmental sector assessment action plan for climate mitigation and flood disaster management in Kogi State. Yes, next slide. Let's go, because of the time. We have preamble. It is an absolute privilege to stand before you today as the Commissioner of Environment, Kogi State, representing the great people of our state, I'm deeply honored and to address this esteemed gathering at the 54th National Conference and Annual General Meeting of the Nigeria Institute of Town Planners. Gentlemen and ladies, today, this conference serves as a platform for collaborative efforts and knowledge exchange by bringing together experts, policymakers, and stakeholders who are dedicated to addressing the critical issues of building climate and flood resilient cities along River Niger and Benue. I extend warm greetings to the team that put this conference together and acknowledge the presence of our distinguished audience. I must say this, that this conference is timely for us in the face of global concern and commitment to tackle the effect of climate change, especially global warming and flooding. Today, as a person who has piloted the affairs of environment sector at the subnational level, my experiences so far have been overwhelming and challenging due to the rigorous commitment it requires to respond promptly to the devastating damages we continue to face wherever there's flooding. This conference signifies not only a convergence of experts, but also a collective effort to brainstorm on one of the most pressing challenges that has to do with climate change. That's the outline. We have the introduction, we have demography, we have current flooding update in Kogi State, internal factor causing annual flood disaster in Kogi State. Then we'll have way forward and conclusion. Next slide. Yes, floods have devastating consequences, and they have become an ever-increasing global concern. In Kogi State, we are not yet recovered from the devastating effect of flooding due to its recurrent nature since 2012. That is not to say that flooding came about in 2012, because in 1936 you have one, but the most recent is what we are trying to deal with now. Then you have flooding that threatens ecosystem, economy, and our vision for a sustainable future. It is our collective responsibility to understand, adapt, and respond to this challenge. The issue of climate change revolves around manifestation of complex interaction between natural phenomena and human activities. In Kogi State, we have witnessed firsthand the devastating effect of flooding on our communities, infrastructure, agriculture, and the lives of our people. The time has come for a paradigm shift. Sustainable development is the cornerstone of our response to the challenges posed by flooding. It offers a comprehensive framework that integrates environmental, social, and economic aspects, aiming to create a resilient society that can withstand and probably recover from floods while fostering long-term growth. As the Commissioner of Environment, I firmly believe in the power of sustainable. Yes, let's go to the next slide. That's the demography. Kogi State is the confluence state of Nigeria, of course. It borders about 10 states, including FCT. That is why it is called Gateway to both North and South. And is strategically located in major connecting states between North and Southern regions of Nigeria. According to a published report, 82% of Nigeria's northern and south road traffic passes through the state. Of course, that is why you know that Kogi State is now becoming an household name as it affects flooding in Nigeria. The state has significant ecological challenges, which significantly contributes to natural disaster. This next slide. Next slide. Next slide. That is where you have in the ongoing physical verification and enumeration of affected communities in Kogi State as of week 43. Okay, yeah, that's the summary. That's the summary. Before we go there, we missed a slide there. But here you have the summary table of confirmed flood. Like I said, we have, yes, in the ongoing physical verification and enumeration affected, no, it's still the same. All right, then we have, like I said, in the ongoing physical verification and enumeration affected, yes, we have Kogi State as of week 43, 10 local government of the 21 local government of the state are still flooded. And this is about 43% of the state's local government. So you have over 22 former IDP camps are currently operational, being jointly managed by the Ministry of State Emergency Management Agency, SEMA. 10 local governments with a population of over 1.8 million have been affected by the flood. According to SEMA and our technical team, over 471,500 persons have been displaced and live in the camps, as well as host communities across the state. 16 flood-related deaths and 29 severe injuries have been recorded. Yes, that's the table there. As you can see, we have this local government as Lokoja local government. We have Kogi Koto Karufe local government. If you are familiar with that terrain, you know that during the last flood, you know that between the bridge, the Moritala Bridge, and Kotonkarufe, that's where you have vehicular movement total halted last year. And so you know the economic damage that has caused. You have Ibaji local government. Ibaji is a local government that was totally underwater in the last, and these are people who will always tell you that even if you ask them to move during the sensitization period, they will tell you they are in their ancestral home and so they cannot leave. So it's quite pathetic. And so these are that's the map showing you the cause of flood disaster in Kogi State. Yes, the degree of flooding is location specific. Yes, you have low elevation also known as low line of or depressed areas are highly susceptible to flooding than high elevation. Water flows down from a high elevation to a lower elevation. Reports have shown recently that flood situation was attributed in Kogi State to the excess water discharging from Lagdo Dam in Cameroon, which passes through the river Benue down to the Niger region. Then you have the incomplete, these are causes of that disaster in Kogi State. The incomplete dredging of the river Niger, which has led to sedimentation and siltation of the river Niger, thus a reduced holding capacity of the confluence and river Niger, thereby spilled into the coastal communities. Then you have another cause, non-provision of dams at the downstream and elevated channels of the river Niger, which is along the Lokoja, as recommended in the 2012 study by World Bank, that a reservoir is required in Lokoja, given the annual volume of runoff water, which empties in the confluence annually. This is estimated to be about 3,000 billion cubic meters, according to NISA. Then you have, again, poor channelization of water, despite the unique peculiarity of the state geographical and topological features, which has rendered the states and particularly communities along the river more vulnerable. It is noteworthy that the houses damaged in Kogi State are in communities close to the federal highways and the flood-prone areas and even the coastal regions. You have equally the non-relocation of 2012 and 2022 vulnerable and affected communities by the relevant agencies in the disaster-prone areas. High cost of building materials and non-donation of same to flood victims, especially as a local government we call BASA, to facilitate and encourage relocation of settlements from floodplain region to elevated areas. Then you have gaps in urban renewal and urban upgrade of traditional communities along the major rivers. You have lack of drainage in host communities, leading to dispatch of water tributaries and distributary, especially during heavy downpour, leading to flood and erosion. You have blockage of drainages due to accumulation of solid waste. This is as a result of indiscriminate disposal of waste to drainage system by major communities. You have lack of adequate support for flood emergency response, which covers, the camp management, sensitization, food and nutrition, logistics and telecommunication, waste evacuation, drainage, etc. Next slide. Yes, you have a way forward. What are the way forwards? One, you have, if we can have a construction of 2 mega dams to receive heavy flow and regulate excess from water boundaries. Dams should be situated in, there's a place we call Jamata, it's very close to the river there, or the bridge. We call it Muritala Bridge there, close to Kotonkarufi. And equally, we can have another one. There's a place we call Ganaja. Ganaja is in Ajakuta local government. Then you have provision of excavators and trucks for consistent maintenance of coastal lanes and river boundaries, meaning dredging for removal of solid waste, debris, obstacles that obstruct river flows. Then you have, again, construction and extension of beach embankment along the coastal lines area. We have one that is ongoing, is a project of about 2 billion naira. It's still very much in progress. It has even reached 90%. And so we are hoping that before this year runs out, we should be able to have it completed. Then you have construction and installation of early warning mechanism to monitor water rising level and generate meteorological data in flood-affected communities. In Kogi State, we have this in about 5 or 6 local government already, and so that we monitor daily and to record, for example, like daily we monitor and we try to see that then let's see again the urban renewal through ecological and water sanitation. Yes, the presidential committee should partner with, we hope that the presidential committee will partner with the Kogi State government to embark on the rehabilitation of same communities in the affected local government through the provision of building material to enable them to settle down in higher flood-free location. You have provision, maintenance, expansion of dredging of canals, and desiccation of drainages across flood-affected 10 local government. Next slide. Next slide. Yes, next slide so that we can then we have promote environmental sanitation and hygiene in Kogi State. Okay. Yes, construction of VIP toilets. Yes. Promotion of yes. These are just our own our own contribution. Then you have promote environmental sanitation. Yes. Provision of funding to embark on evacuation of about 2,000 heaps of refuse. Yes. Yes, let's slide. Next slide. Yes, construction. Okay, let me just conclude. I will conclude by saying to effectively address flooding, we must invest in building resilience infrastructure, most especially that has been consistently experiencing flood disaster for the past 11 years, and states that accommodate our major rivers such as Kogi State. Sustained advocacy and sensitization among the public, states and local government authorities on flooding disaster risk management, and the building of resilience community in consideration of unique flood vulnerability of Kogi State. Yes, I will now conclude by saying to effectively address flooding, we must invest in building resilience infrastructure, most especially in states that have consistent experience flood disaster for the infrastructure. Yes, infrastructure plays a vital role in mitigating the effect of flooding. It is crucial to adopt climate resilient design and engineering practice while constructing roads, bridges, building, and drainage systems. Implementing nature-based solutions such as green infrastructure and floodplain management can enhance water retention and reduce the intensity of flood. Lastly, we must also review our land and develop policy to as well ensure maintenance of a data-based system where data on ecological issues and information across the state can be documented for proper urban planning, design of resilient cities across the state. Thank you and God bless.
Once again, a round of applause for the Honorable Commissioner, Kogi State Ministry of Environment. Thank you for honoring these invitations. We are very grateful, sir. Now, let me invite another distinguished speakers who is going to talk to us on flooding and coping strategies in Anambra State. I have no other person than Honorable Architect Michael Okonkwo, who happens to be the chairman Anambra Urban Regeneration Council. You are welcome, sir.
Okay. Mr. President, all the ESCO members who organized this wonderful event, let me also recognize and appreciate Town Planner Lukman Oshodi, Arctic Infrastructure and their partners. I also saw Town Planner Olasi, who was the chapter chairman or president in Anambra State when I was the MD of Oka Capital Territory. And of course, one of the council members of Anambra Urban Regeneration Council, Town Planner Anayo Val Ezenwa is here. But I must run through this because I know that time is of the essence. Mine is to talk about coping strategies in Anambra State with regards to flooding. Let's go. Next slide, please. Okay, we have the outline here, which of course is the introduction, affected areas, characteristics of flooding, effects of flooding, flood impacts, indigenous prediction strategies, indigenous flood coping strategies, institutional flood coping strategies, and of course, coping strategies that bring sustainability. I must bring to our attention that it is the understanding of indigenous coping strategies of a vulnerable people through their indigenous knowledge system to a threat is essential to the outside, so that the outside interventions can be built on these local strategies. You know, Anambra State, next slide. Because most of the, Anambra has 21 local governments and most, about 10 of it, of course, along the Niger River lie in the lower areas. And so, like many of these areas along the Niger and Benue rivers throughout Nigeria, Anambra State is also prone to natural disasters such as flooding and the rest of it. And then findings show that the major cause of flooding in Anambra State in the affected areas is usually due to increased rainfall. And of course, studies further indicate that Anambra State usually experienced one of the most devastating floods in the country, especially in 2020 flooding, 22 flooding. But of course, everybody experienced 2012 flooding. In the recent times, of course, climate change has exacerbated these issues, leading to food insecurities and so on. The high flood risk areas in Anambra State, like I said, is within the 10 local governments of the 21, and that's Obaru, Ayamelum, Anambra East, Anambra West, Onitsha North, Onitsha South, Awka North, Idemili South, Ekwusigo, and Ihiala. Anambra, of course, I had mentioned, was among the states in the country that battled the massive flooding in 2022, as over 300 communities in the 6 local government areas were underwater. The 2022 devastation was described as the highest since 2012. And according to the records obtained from the State Emergency Management Agency, Obaru had 286 displaced persons, Anambra West had 237,000, Anambra East 103, Awka North 10,345 victims, while Ayamelum had 9,240 flood cases with 5,468 persons displaced. Next slide, please. Again, in the map, you can better understand the locations of these 10 local governments that I had mentioned. But in 2022, Anambra East recorded the highest number of affected persons in 2012, with 15,421 individuals. In fact, most of Anambra East was underwater in 2012, that we had to actually call the attention of the federal government and the world to come and bail Anambra State out. Next slide, please. Okay, but because Anambra State flooding issues have been identified as being caused mostly by heavy rain, it is very important to understand the characteristics of flooding. We have flood occurs when the geomorphic equilibrium in the river system is disturbed because of either intrinsic or extrinsic factors, or when the system crosses the geomorphic threshold. You have, on the one hand, flooding in a river due to aggradation of the riverbed, which is intrinsic, or in the other hand, flooding in a river due to heavy rainfall, which is what Anambra State suffers. And then, of course, I have the graphics to show that. Next slide, please. Okay, we also have to understand the next slide. We're going to talk about the effects of flooding in Anambra State. While they are looking for the slide, I have to tell you, okay, well, the torrential rainfalls has caused severe riverine floods across the communities along the river Niger. Of course, I had mentioned that these are upward trends in the number of people affected by the seasonal rains and floods, and population often struggle to cope with effects. According to UN, the number of people affected by water disaster has doubled since 2015 and is increasing as we go on. Then the flood impacts itself, as shown in the pictures there, include human loss, property loss, affected major roads, disruption of transit mobility systems, spread of waterborne diseases, and communication breakdown most of the times. And then, of course, the electricity cut off, economic and social disruption, and increased air pollution. Okay, now, coping system involves before flooding and after flooding. And even within that, I had also divided it into two: the indigenous coping strategies and, of course, institutional coping strategies. In the affected areas of Anambra State, in the in the local communities. There's something I found out that I wanted to share with you. You know, people must survive, so they always devise methods. They want to know before the flood comes, and then I had to highlight what they told us when we did when a study was done. They said that frequent croaking of frogs indicates immediate rain. Once the frogs begin to croak louder and more frequently, then the community people know that it's going to happen. And then another thing is indigenous flood prediction strategies that are done by the communities by the color of the rivers. When the rivers start to change colors, they know that rain is coming. Of course, this table shows more of the different types of indigenous prediction strategies. Next slide. And this is what I tried to show from these borrowed graphics. Next slide. Well, the next slide is really to thank you. I want to let you know that I am a friend of the town planners. You know, what you do is very great, and that's why I accepted this invitation to join you. Thank you very much.
A round of applause, yeah, for the Honorable Architect Michael Okonkwo for these beautiful presentations. I don't know if John is ready with us online to take the last presentations. Who is going to?
Yes, I am. Thank you very.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Olatunde. And you know, it's been really fantastic to hear online all of these important presentations, which have really given some very strong insights into the vulnerabilities of the relevant states to the flooding from the Niger and Benue rivers, but also the actions that are needed in order to build the resilience to those flooding vulnerabilities. So our final speaker today, before we move on to questions and comments and answers, is Lola Grundmann from the Nature for Water facility. And so we've had comments from previous speakers about how hard infrastructure can be mixed with soft infrastructure to sometimes get better effects in terms of building resilience to flooding vulnerabilities. So we have the opportunity with our last speaker to hear about nature-based solutions in order to mitigate the impacts of flooding. So if I can hand over to Lola, please. Lola, you're currently muted, I think.
Okay, thank you. You should be able to unmute myself.
Yes,
so
excellent.
I
Thank you.
sort that out quickly. But apologies. Slides moved as well. So let's start from the beginning. That's always good. Just to confirm, you can hear me and see my slides.
We can hear you clearly and see the slides. Yeah, thank you
for having me today. I'm an engagement manager at the Nature for Water facility. And for today, I wanted to first give you an introduction to the Nature for Water facility and who we are. I then wanted to specifically talk about nature-based solutions because they're at the heart of what we do and how they can be used to address water security challenges and flooding in particular. Then I wanted to give you some background on the work we're about to start in Nigeria. And lastly, I was on nature-based solutions and flood risk mitigation and adaptation. So the Nature for Water facility is a technical facility. That means that we are providing technical advice to establish watershed investment programs. Now, what are watershed investment programs? Watershed investment programs are sustainable mechanisms for collective action on water security. So they bring together different water users, usually the utilities, agriculture, businesses, and government, to invest in ecosystem protection and restoration upstream. So they really are a governance and finance mechanism to connect the downstream beneficiaries with upstream catchment restoration and nature-based solutions. Now, these concepts have proven to be highly successful all over the world, and particularly in Africa, actually. but they're extremely difficult to set up. And this is because they require very rigorous scientific, economic, and governance analysis that really kind of underpins a successful watershed investment program. And this is where the Nature for Water facility comes in. We as a facility really help provide some of the technical underpinning that is required to deliver a successful program. Now, who are we? We are a partnership between two organizations. One is the Nature Conservancy, which you might actually be aware of. They're a global NGO focused on nature conservation, and they bring more than 20 years of experience in setting up those mechanisms, those watershed investment mechanisms. And but they were kind of lacking the ability to scale this approach and the ability to operationalize it. So they were looking for a partner, and they partnered with Pegasus, which is a specialist advisory firm based out of Africa, South Africa. And they bring a lot of experience in conservation finance, institutional arrangements, and fund design. So together they made a really strong kind of team to provide very detailed and technical advice for watershed investment programs. We are a blended international team. So I'm originally from Switzerland. I'm based in London. I work in the UK, but also in West Africa. So generally our staffing model is set up to really serve engagements and projects all over the world. And you can see this on the slide. So we have a portfolio of about 25 local watershed investment programs we're working on since we launched in 2022. They're all over the world. 12 more are in scoping. So we're really looking to scale this. And you can see a lot of the demand is actually coming from Africa. About 50% of our work is on the continent. Now, let's look at nature-based solutions in a bit more detail and what they can do to address water security challenges. So what do we mean when we talk about water security? So there's different aspects to this. Water security on the one hand means that there is domestic water and human well-being, so access to water, but also water security means having enough water for economic prosperity. It also means managing the risk of too much or too little water well, and really managing the natural features and the fresh water sources where the water actually comes from. So these are kind of the aspects. I mean, but to break it down simply, water security basically means or is achieved if a society is able to manage water resources well to meet the needs of the people as under water security. And generally, we kind of conceptualize the water security challenges into three categories. The first one being water availability. So this has an aspect of resource, so water resource, as well as access in it. The second category would be water quality issues, water quality challenges, and lastly, flood risks. And we specialize really on using nature-based solutions to specifically target these water security challenges. And the beautiful thing is, when targeting one of these challenges, you're always creating a whole host of co-benefits, and often you're also tackling more than just one of those challenges. So if you're trying to address flood risk, often you're having a very positive impact on water quality as well, and you're creating a whole host of co-benefits, including carbon sequestration, potentially improved biodiversity, improved air quality potentially, or human well-being because of more green space in cities, etc. So let's have a bit of a closer look of the NBS options available for flood risk mitigation that we tend to use a lot. And I've tried to categorize them. And the first category is revegetation. So that can include the targeted protection of already existing green features and habitat. This can include active afforestation and reforestation, or for example, riparian restoration, etc. And the way that it works, and I'm sure you're all aware, but trees increase infiltration rates into the ground. They reduce the water runoff speed and therefore reduce the flood risk. Another great set of solutions are wetlands. So these can be constructed wetlands, but particularly restoring restoring wetlands can be incredibly impactful to mitigate floods. And this is because they store an enormous amount of water and they slowly release it after heavy rains, meaning again, they increase the infiltration into the groundwater and really reduce flood risk thereby. The next category, fire management, is a bit of a special one. They're a bit more niche, I guess, but they're incredibly helpful, or it's incredibly important to manage fire and uncontrolled fires, because they can, first of all, they remove the vegetation that is important for infiltration, but also they can create really kind of ugly and dangerous mudslides if it rains right after the fire. So really important to manage wildfires well. And then the last category is SUDS. So that stands for Sustainable Urban Drainage Systems. So there's numerous nature-based interventions that can be used in an urban context to increase water storage and increase drainage. These can include green roofs, green walls, swales, increasing impermeable surfaces within a city, etc. So these are roughly kind of the categories of nature-based solutions that town planners and others can really consider in their portfolio. So I just wanted to move on now to give you some background on the work that we're doing in Nigeria, and then we can look at the case studies in greater detail. But in Nigeria, we are, on behalf of Coca-Cola and TNC Africa, are conducting a pre-feasibility analysis to try and understand what is the potential of nature-based solutions to address water security challenges, with a focus on Ogun-Osun River Basin. So we basically are investigating whether further investigation is justified, and whether TNC and Coca-Cola should move forward to investigate a whip further in those catchments. So this is what we do in the first step. In the second step, we're zooming out. Are there any other that would be also a low-hanging fruit and a good place to potentially conduct further investigations? So the outputs, that what we're really trying to achieve, is providing recommendations to Coca-Cola of where to do more detailed analysis, which then will bring funding and investment later down the line. So where to do further investments. And some of the key questions we're looking to answer are quite simple, but we're at the very beginning of this research. Is who are the key stakeholders and what do they care about? We're looking to understand what are the key water security challenges and what could potential MBS responses be. And it's been really interesting in a lot of the conversations, actually flooding and the related water quality deterioration it has come up as a key concern to stakeholders. So this might likely be a focus moving forward. And we've particularly talked about how green nature-based solutions can actually help protect grey infrastructure. So whether that's dams or infrastructure for abstraction points, if nature-based solutions can contribute to protect those, for example, by reducing turbidity in the water, etc., then that can have very significant cost savings in terms of infrastructure damage in the long term. So likely we'll be focusing on that, but it's still on a high level. We're not very far into this analysis, so that's why I really want to draw on some case studies to give you a bit of a better insight. But what we tend to do in most of our analysis is also look at a bit of a cost-benefit ratio of what these solutions mean. In a feasibility stage, that will be in greater detail, but that's really something we're trying to understand as well. So moving on to the case studies, they are work that we've done in other regions. They all, or they both are touching on flood risk and are centered around that. And therefore I've picked them because I think they will be able to provide a good insight of why nature-based solutions can be impactful and in what ways. And the first case study I want to touch upon is a city in North America. We're still working with them, so I've kind of anonymized the client name. The city is based in the Great Lake area, and it is suffering from very similar problems to many cities, but the urban and agricultural development over many, many years has really led to very drastic changes in the region's hydrology. So they've altered the river meandering, so how the river flows, but also drained wetlands, which means that there is really reduced water storage in those landscapes where there used to be water that has filled up with sediments. So when it rains, the water has nowhere to go and it floods off. In addition to that, the city is located at the bottom of the watershed. So the city is located by the water, which basically means that the whole catchment is draining through that city already. So it's naturally quite flood prone already. Further to that, the city is growing. It has a growing urban population and it's surrounded by productive agricultural lands. So not like native forests or something, but heavy agriculture that is productive. And lastly, climate change is putting the cherry on the cake for the city because forecasts are predicting the area to get warmer and wetter. So that really means that there's a very stark increase of flood risk in this area and related water quality degradation as well, resulting from sewage overflows and nutrients and sediments running off with the heavy rain. So what is the solution? What can be done? To mitigate the issue, the local utility of the city has launched a program. And that program is specifically focused on active restoration of forests and wetlands. Now, the utility is a very highly respected municipal authority, and they've basically already introduced or implemented a lot of nature-based solutions in the very close vicinity of the city as pilots, so to say. And that has been able to really prove that nature-based solutions are a very effective strategy for climate change. And that allowed them to actually raise quite a lot of funds. And now they have the ambition to take this further and take this into the wider catchment, this approach, because they've realized we can't just tackle the problem where the symptoms are, but we need to go where the root causes are. And the root causes of flooding are often starting way further up in the catchment rather than just around the city. And now Nature for Water is working with this utility to prioritize their efforts moving forward. So we're working with them to develop a strategic plan and a decision-making tool so that they can understand where to focus their efforts. We have some preliminary results, which you can see on the right. So the areas in dark green represent the areas that are highest priority for them to tackle. And this really shows that actually catchment restoration really does have a huge impact on flood mitigation in the city. The city sits around here. So actually the areas in the vicinity and in the city have quite a low priority. This isn't to say that sustainable urban drainage systems, such a mouthful, SUDs, don't play an important role. They do, but so it's very important to look at solutions holistically. In order to mitigate flood risk in the city, you do have to tackle the wider catchment and the problems up there. What we've also created for them is a benefit curve. So you can see here, this is the area of intervention along the x-axis, and on the y-axis, we have the volume of runoff avoided. And you can see that basically the first 20% of implementation, they actually get a really strong increase of volume avoided, so reduced runoff. So it's really proven to be highly effective. And what is really interesting to see is that the benefit curve actually doesn't really flatten that much after, but it stays quite steep. And this is really because there is basically a kind of a system impact that with every additional, or a compound effect, basically. So with every additional area that is restored, with a wetland or a forest, the entire system is starting to work better. So you're not really having a flattening of the curve so much, but it keeps going on linearly. And you can see if this is based on like a really kind of dream big scenario, but if they manage to implement their best case scenario, so implementing 100%, they would be able to save 74 million gallons in reducing that flood risk. So these are the preliminary findings. This is the first case study. Moving into the second one, which is the flood risk in Dar es Salaam. Dar es Salaam is in Tanzania and faces actually quite similar challenges. Here we've done a more high-level study in collaboration with the World Bank. So it was really trying to understand what are the key drivers and potential solutions without looking in detail at the cost-benefit ratios yet. But I thought it's interesting to see. So also with this city, you can see it's naturally in a flood-prone area, which you can see here from this topography graph here. There's a mountain range here, and all of the water drains down towards the coast, and the city is based here. Again, climate change is predicting for the area to get warmer and wetter, and there's forecasts that there is an increased rainfall intensity. So there'll be more intense rainfalls as well, leading to flooding. And the city, similar to the other case study, has a growing urban population and, crucially, a very rapidly expanding informal and unplanned settlements. And this is where it gets really interesting. Nigeria surely has similar problems too. You can see here on the map on the right, the planned residents are in this lighter yellow, and then the red and orange shades are the informal settlements. And the informal settlements particularly are in low-lying flood-prone areas. So that has really strong implications for the flood vulnerability of really low-income households. So there is a big justice element to this too. The city is urbanizing quickly, and it's not only sprawling out, but it's also growing in intensity. So there's very low impermeable surfaces, leads to the degradation of the catchment and the natural features around it that actually have these regulating processes and reduce the flood risk. So again, what were the recommendations? The first one that we recommended to urban to reintegration and greening of the urban space. There is some tree canopies and some natural features within the city that really demonstrate already that they can provide shading, reduce urban heat effect. They kind of function like a sponge and reduce water runoff when it rains, therefore reduce flooding and create a whole host of other co-benefits like air quality improvements, etc. In addition to that, which is, again, tackling more in the urban environment, the other recommendation was we need to look at the wider catchment, and we need to actually protect, especially those key features that are highly important in kind of those natural assets that are important for regulating and that haven't been degraded yet. There is a few of those. So there is it's been degraded massively. You can see the yellow shades it's basically changed land cover from 1995 to 2010. Everything that was green was forest, and what's here is yellow is now bushland. It has also increased in what is here green grassland, and it's also increased in built-up area. So all areas that have a higher runoff and less infiltration. So again, I think just to summarize, I think both case studies nicely show that when it comes to flood risk mitigation, planning needs to look at this holistically. And while it's important to tackle the urban environments, it is also really crucial to tackle the watershed further upstream. This is kind of something that we focus on greatly at Nature for Water, and building those mechanisms that help drawing finance to those upstream interventions. They're harder to justify because they're a bit further away from the people often and where the people are, but actually they're very closely interlinked. So a lot of the work that we do is creating those bridges, and we'll actually be working with Arctic Infrastructure in Nigeria on really doing stakeholder engagement, and I'd be really interested to also potentially engage some of you in the audience to understand your perspectives on flooding and the potential that MBS could have in the country. So that's me, and thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Lola. That's been really insightful, including the two examples that you've shared. I think there's a lot of potential cross-learnings from what we've heard about the vulnerabilities in the other states in Nigeria. So thank you very much for that. So I think now we've got some time for questions. We're a little bit behind schedule, but perhaps we can open the floor now to comments and questions from participants at today's event. So perhaps we can hand back to the room and to Olatunde for any questions to the speakers that we've heard today. And I'll look out for any hands that go up online. Over to you, Olatunde.
Intend to do now is to allow about 2 or 3 people, because we are running out of times, for their comments, questions, and we have all our speakers seated here who is going to respond adequately to your comments and questions. Please, can we have another microphone, please? Can we have our hands up if we want to? Yes, can I see you standing up? I'm sorry, please, be on your feet. This is number 1. Prof, number 2. Oh, sorry, we just want to allow 3 people. Okay, please, where's the mic? Yes.
Good day, everybody. I'm Town Planner Victor Fitzgerald Obugo from the Delta State chapter. I want to comment on 2 things from this last stuff. It's very clearing that GIS played a major role, and transformative data did not only tell us about Dar es Salaam and the growing urban population, but she was even telling us where the informal settlements, locations where they are, and how whatever is going to affect them, climate change, so that solutions being sought will be tangible and effective. In Nigeria, I doubt if there's any state in Nigeria that can do this. So where do we start from? Especially when we're talking of poverty capital and economic goals. That is a basic problem for town planning. Secondly, in our world of today, we're talking about climate change and settlements residents. How do we talk about climate change, settlements, residents when we are not even talking about energy transition?
Please, we can't hear you here. Please.
How do we talk about climate change and settlements, residents when we're not talking about energy transition and energy mix? Because the more we know that the carbon footprint is increasing, and the black hole is getting more. Therefore, temperature is increasing, and we're going to be having more of these things. In any case, we are now going to be talking about fossil fuels, whereas we have not even seen money to buy the fossil fuels. How much more to be talking about transition? By 2030, the world will soon be living fossil fuels. We are not thinking about that. We're not planning about that. We're not being proactive. That's what I'm talking about. In this particular session, I want to know, what are we talking about? Energy transition, energy mix, which is vital.
Thank you. Please, Prof, give the mic to Prof for the second comments.
Thank you very much. My comment centers around what I want to call neglects of regional planning in our development planning endeavors in Nigeria. From the reports that we had from China, this issue of rivers and forests, which they call blue and green issues, have been integrated into their planning, especially with regard to cities around the oceans. And we know already that these cities around oceans and seas constitutes a very significant population of the world population. And so they need to receive attention. But from many other comments and studies we have had this morning, the results or way forward that we hear of is always an array, a list of things that should be done. For example, we're talking about adaptation strategy, we're talking about resilience strategy and all that. But we have neglected the area of encompassing all these strategies in a regional plan or in a physical plan, the example of which we have been shown from China. My question, therefore, is, should we not sit down as planners and other environment-related professionals to stop this idea of going to our policy decision makers with long list of build this here, create awareness there, do advocacy there, we should be doing this, we should be doing this. What we need to do is to encompass all this in regional plans. But all we do many a times today is to focus on only on the settlements. But the problem of a flood transcends settlements. It goes across into our forests, into our rivers, into our oceans, where livelihood comes from. I want to make it as a recommendation that we should desist this idea of going to our policymakers with arrays of lists of what they should be done, they should be doing, but with this advocacy of what's the plans that will bring all these things together, so that when government come, when government go and government come, they will see something to work on. No government will come around and say, well, this list of things that are presented before me, okay, let me pick one or two as my priorities. We should try to make them know that planning, urban and regional planning, should be part of governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. The last but not the least person.
Thank you very much.
Before we hand over to our speakers.
My name is Stamplana Ukeje Ukwabi. I'm from Abia State. I have just two short concerns. One for Tamplana Lukman Oshodi. The concern which you called revelation that Bayelsa may disappear in the next 50 years, it's really mind-boggling because Rotterdam in Netherlands is actually very low, lower than Bayelsa, and they've been able to solve the flood problem they've had over the years. That assertion, I guess, may put off investors in Bayelsa State. I think we should be looking at the solution. And my second comment is, because the Honorable Commissioner from Kogi, I believe he is closer to the ruling party. For many years now, the counterpart dam to Lado Dam Lado Dam, each time it's opened, we've had serious flooding problem across Lokoja, Kogi, Anambra, and that's the major culprit. What plans would you prefer to the present administration in Abuja to ensure our counterpart dam is built? Thank you very much.
A round of applause for all who have given us comments. Okay, just 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Chris. I thank you so much for the opportunity. First of all, I thank you, the chairman of NITP, for inviting the central bank to be part of this. I want to make an observation concerning the issue of regional planning, the issue of securing an approved building plan, the issue of even urban renewal associated with building houses in cities. I think a lot need to be done by this body, particularly for those who give approvals. You may not know, or if you know, please try to do something about it, that most of them are compromised. They are compromised in the sense that they know actually that this is a green area. They know actually that this is a path to waterways. They know actually that you are not supposed to build there. They will accept money from you, give you approval. You go and build. And after a while, bulldozer will come and build down the building. Then you begin to look at the man who built as if he's a fool, or that he didn't know. He just suddenly woke up and built on that place. I am thinking there should be in-house cleaning, in the sense that those who give approval should be above board. Above board in the sense that if you know that this is not doable, let it not be doable, no matter how you are tempted with money or feel to illustrate. The earlier we do that, we begin to check ourselves, because it's not always blaming government has not done this, government has not done that. We are part of government. If we have that kind of culture, please, this place is not buildable. Don't build on it. If you build on it, even if Soludo government did not bring it down, or the government of the Delta State did not bring it down in this administration, subsequently you will suffer the loss. And then we start blaming people. We start blaming government. So we begin to ask ourselves, how is this association or this unique umbrella body going to term its members to please, as regional planners, let them be good regional planners so that we can checkmate the issue of flooding here and there and building at the wrong place at the wrong time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that some questions were directed to Town Planner Oshodi, and Honorable Commissioner, as well as Prof. But let me start from the Architect Okonkwo, who is going to give us his own perspectives towards some of these comments and questions. Let's start from you, sir.
That's it. Well, first I want to apologize for the projections. It made the presentation very difficult to flow. So that said, I'm sure that they can still share it through your platforms. I really wanted to talk about or respond to the last concern expressed, which has to do with approvals and enforcement of such approvals. You know, as a body, and I'm speaking as a friend, I told you I'm your friend, right? If you do not do something about that, you know, they will always look at you with some disrespect. And I know that, I mean, listening to you here, I know that a lot of you are very great people who take your professions very seriously. So I concur that the NITP needs to do something very seriously with the people who give the approvals, one, and then the people who enforce, because these are all people that contribute to the bad names that you get. Because I know that the chairman of Anambra Physical Planning Board is always getting it from my governor, always really blaming him for what's going on. And in fact, Anambra State has now instituted that any problems that we have to trace to the town planner who gave the approval. And that's where the governor wants to start. And then, before we even talk about the person who is building. So I just, really, that's the one I want to deal with. So thank you for the opportunity. I encourage you to really do something about this. Thank you.
Thank you, the architect. I think this discussion is beyond approvals. You listen to some of the discussion yesterday, go beyond approval. We are looking at, some solutions that needed to be done, especially to mitigate this kind of problem. So, sir, from your own perspective, sir.
Yes, I will just react by saying that the problem of, maybe town planners giving approval in areas that are not supposed to be, I think it's a systemic problem across the country, right from the political class, right from the highest presidency. Why suddenly politics has failed? Why is it that governance has failed? Why is it that every sector of the economy has failed? I think it's a systemic problem. But having said that, I think town planners are already doing something about that and will rise to responsibility. But the point there's a poser here. If a town planner says that, oh, no, you cannot build in that place, and then he's a political heavyweight, and he goes to the governor, and he goes
to scare away the investors. It was mentioned by the delegates from Bayelsa State during the workshops we put together sometime in July. And the issue around the Bayelsa is that we put it up to let the relevant stakeholders know that it is time for partnership to really get a solution to the flood crisis in Bayelsa. If we know Bayelsa very well, it's one of the oil producing states we have in Nigeria. And no government will hold its arms and allow that very strategic state to disappear in that manner. So, but then some